It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is production designer Mick Strawn, that has done several of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, such as Nightmare 4, 5, Candyman, Blade, half a dozen other films. Hello.
Hey, how you doing? I have been around for a while. It's true.
What are you doing now?
What am I doing now? I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I'm going to be working as production designer and first AD on the Vengeance Friday the 13th film. I'm going to be working with Jason Brooks.
Jason Brooks! What made you want to do this particular project? Out of all the stuff that you have done, do you think this is more, a different challenge for you, or do you think this is something a little bit more at ease, your pace, but still a fun project?
Yeah, you know, it's a fun project. I was approached by Brown Space Films, a bunch of guys that I know, done some little things with them on and off, and I get along with everybody, and I decided that before I die, I'd like to have all 4 of the majors somewhere on my resume. So once I'm done with this, look out Halloween. Wow.
So you're going to be like the next, 17th remake or prequel of Halloween?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh, boy. I tell you what. So when it comes to, like, talent-wise, do you think, even though you've been in the business for so long, do you think it should still be earned rather than just be recognized in this business?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I mean, you know, I kind of consider the way that things are going that everybody's kind of starting from scratch again. Because just like in the turn of the century, when all the equipment was first made and they started to create a structure for films, then we used the same equipment and devices and stuff. We were using all the same stuff, even in the 80s and most of the 90s. You know, cameras were extremely heavy. They were done with film. You had grip equipment that had not changed since the turn of the century. You had the name grips that had come from being plumbers back in the day. The way that I feel is that 2000s were just to get the equipment hammered out, and now you have basically a whole new game. Distribution is kind of starting from scratch again. And film, you've got all these amateurs that have almost as good equipment. Let's put it this way. I have the same equipment in my pocket with my phone. I have the same capacities in that phone as a $500,000 camera package had in 1983. I think that there's all these people that need to relearn how to do it with the tools that they have, and I'd like to be there for that.
And definitely their attitudes change too, because yeah, sure, you got all this nice equipment, but first of all, learn how to use it. Second of all, even though you may know how to use it, but can you actually perform it well and actually keep a level head about it?
Well, you see, here's the thing. We had 100 years of development in the film in how to deal with basically the same equipment, but the equipment was refined and so forth. But here's the thing. All of that knowledge was in the hands of the professionals. All the day-to-day of knowing how to do little things was in the hands of an elite group that worked primarily in Hollywood. And what I'd like to do is bring some of that knowledge to some of the new wave of filmmakers that are doing it with all of this equipment, because it's expanded the base. Excellent example of that would be the lenses that were used in the 70s and 80s. The lenses that weren't built with computer-aided facilities. These lenses, you know, had a softer aspect, a much smaller depth of field, and things have been developing since then. As soon as computers got involved, you know, all of a sudden the lenses were absolutely getting everything incredibly crisp and working a longer and longer depth of field until you're seeing almost everything. In fact, think of a skating film with the GoPro cameras and stuff like that. I mean, everything is crisp, and you know, if you're trying to be narrative about it, you kind of are looking back at the 80s glass going, well, the thing is that glass helps me tell a particular story, and it lends itself particularly to horror films. Whereas, you know, for instance, the GoPro effects lend themselves to the skaters because that's what they're used to. I'm trying to use the concept of that 80s glass and we're bringing that concept onto the Vengeance film so that we can have more of that true 80s horror look.
Oh, definitely. Do you think with these lenses, of course, depending on how it's being used, do you think even though these are really nice, fresh lenses that make everything look great, do you think some of these drawings, when they use it, do you think sometimes that takes away the image of the film itself?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, to stick to my equation with the GoPro cameras, they have developed a style and a feeling that you want to see everything. It's kind of washing over you. But the thing is if you're doing, say, something that's romantic or something that's in horror or something that's moody, sort of like if you were listening to a Miles Davis tune, it's better if you hear that through a tube amp as opposed to the crispness of a digital amp. See what I mean?
I do. You can totally tell the major difference. It's like it's the same thing with music. You stick with either analog or you stick with the stereotype.
Exactly. That goes all the way through because tubes were designed with, they knew that there would have to be a weakness because engineering could only go so far. So certain tubes would sound a certain way, and you would literally engineer in those, like the highs or the lows or something, and each tube would have its own character. And that's kind of like the lenses of the 80s and the lenses of the 70s. And now we're moving into a time where we have all these fabulous, incredible techniques, and just like anything else, you have to learn how to work with them from scratch. I'm going to bring some of the old techniques in to Vengeance and just smash them together with newer techniques, and we're going to do some amazing, more complicated shots than you would normally see on a fan film. That's part of being a production designer, is saying, well, our overall look is going to be like this. We're going to have an 80s effect with the lenses and the glass. We're going to have a more complicated effect on the camera moves and that sort of thing. The acting is going to be more real. See what I'm saying?
Oh, I do. And there's amazing, especially a lot of these newer films, there's a lot of awesome shots like overhead shots or underhead shots or even side facial shots that looks like it can be risky in terms of the moment in the story, but it looks really, really good. Like you get an objective view from the character's view as well as the directorial view.
Exactly. Look at see when you're thinking about what the differences between filming now and filming then. Let me just give you a quick example. If you had, say, we're doing a crane shot. An awful lot of older films, had a crane shot at the beginning and then kind of pulled out of the film with a crane shot. And part of the reason for that was you would think that you would want to use maybe use that crane more. But here's the problem with using the crane. Such a difficult process to set it up and to get the room for it and to get everything locked into its place and to rehearse its movement and so forth, that you got about 2 shots a day out of it. And because of that, you would do them for the 2 most dramatic moments, and those usually tended to be getting us into the story and pulling us out of it. Nowadays, you have a drone operator on the set, and he goes anywhere within the 3-dimensional axis, moves any way that you want to, and it kind of blows out of the water that, using a crane just for the beginning and the end. However, I'm going to add an addendum to that. If you had noticed recently that all those shots, that overhead shots that are being shot with a crane, like for instance following a car or looking out over the town or that kind of shot, that now those shots look very different because they are digitally very, very, very clean. They can't afford to get more complicated lenses up on them.
I love even the movement shots. What I mean, like that example, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I love the where the child is going down the hallway or going across.
Oh, right.
Yeah, panning like across the room. Oh, it's amazing work.
Yeah, and those are very difficult to set up, and with the drone operator, you can do all of that fairly simply.
Definitely more of use and better use, and even still shots just by sitting the camera. Another example is like Follow the Bride, if I got this right. The champagne shot, the intro, for the credit scene. It's just a glass of champagne, but you never know until it zooms out, and you're like, holy crap.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, because I've also seen, the bubbles coming up and stuff, and you come up, and all of a sudden you realize that you're under the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, it's little details like that. It's really amazing, and it really pulls up. And you don't really need to put too much digital use to it on such an organic use of a shot.
Right, but boy, we sure made it easier, huh?
It's definitely, and I really have no complaints about in terms of shots. I mean, there's some really fantastic, especially superhero films. Holy crap, do they use the crap out of those, man? Like all over the place, zooming in, zooming out, and this and that. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, it's crazy with this stuff, man. But with studios like running with these raining on new age films today, do you think cinema has a different definition on aspiring or inspiring?
I think because the great middle range and bottom range of films is now in different hands. I think that big films are the big companies are making big films, and you have films like Netflix that are making all the small films. I think that with the redistribution of that, there's a chance for a great deal of creativity. But I think that most of the really creative stuff is actually happening with some of the low budget things that eventually you're going to see some of the stuff in Netflix eclipsing, in terms of story and so forth, eclipsing some of the big films, because I see them as being kind of big and clunky often. I mean, have you ever seen a film called Dave Made a Maze? Absolutely incredible. You ought to catch it on Hulu, something like that, or something like Frankenstein's Army. Have you seen Frankenstein's Army?
Frankenstein's, is that the one where a crazy doctor and a bunch of mutants, or am I thinking of the wrong film?
Oh yeah, crazy Nazi doctor.
Yeah, I never got to see it, but I know the story of it. Yeah, I've been wanting to see that actually.
Absolutely crazy, and you know what? It became Overlord. It is Overlord. It's the same movie.
Oh wow!
Right though, I mean, the thing is they did it really well with very little money, which can be done now. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to bring sort of a high level of expertise and trying to meld it with modern, younger film crews and all this great equipment that's out here.
There's so many people out there that either want to just make the movie and, of course, make the big bucks, and there's the ones that want to change culture-wise, that want to change something with using film, but there are all those out there that want to make a really good film and just want people to acknowledge the film, that, here's the tools, here's the talent, we work really hard, that kind of mentality. Do you think there's just only a handful now with all that's going on with all, with all the new technology, all the distribution now and all the stuff, everything's going to digital, da-da-da-da-da?
I think that there's a lot of people these days that are grabbing for a way to distribute, to make and distribute these films. I think that we're at the very beginning of a new rush of filmmakers, and because of that, I get this question all the time. Well, how do I take the films that I'm making and how do I make a buck off of them? How do I get them distributed and so forth? And the thing is I don't have answers for that either. I don't think anybody does. It's a truly, truly custom path that anybody takes it to being a commercial filmmaker, and I think that you're going to look back at this time in 15 years and think of it this way. In 15 years, you're going to look back this time, you're going to see the beginnings of all these great filmmakers, and I hope to help some of those filmmakers along.
Like you said, you never know what's going to happen with this. I mean, the market fluctuates. I mean, it's almost like trying to sell a house. Once you place it up there, you don't know who's going to grab it. You don't know who's going to be more interested in it. I mean, you got a whole set of different crowd. You got a new crowd. Your film may be an all horror film. Your film may be a combination, let's say, between horror and superhero type film. Who knows? But the problem is, will it ever generate any real money? That's the biggest question mark that you'll never really know until eventually either someone wants to buy it and turn it to something they want to do, and then eventually be distributed into something that you wanted out of all this after probably 10 years.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think that it's all completely restructuring right now, and I have no idea which way it's going to go. I mean, let's face it, right? Even right now, Netflix is considering releasing some of their films into the theaters first, maybe 5 films or 3 to 5 films a month. I mean, I think that would be amazing, because I think that there's a dearth of smaller, more regional films out there right now. One of the problems is that the big film companies are now getting used to the great big chunks of money that they can make off of an action film that's dubbed into several languages, and a comedy doesn't really do all that well dubbed into other languages. In fact, this is why you see the major studios doing as many Marvel projects as possible. I mean, pretty soon it's going to be like, hey, let's go to the Marvels instead of hey, let's go to the movies.
It's all about the marketing thing when it comes to that. I mean, of course you want to put your new movies in there, but I mean...
But you want to make the biggest bucks you can, and one thing that they will let you know when you're working in films is that it's not an art, it's a business. Do me a favor, I've got a link to my book. I wrote a great book about Nightmare on Elm Street 4, about the making of it. Stay tuned for more news about Vengeance, and listen to my interview, to your interview with Jason Brooks, and me back to back. We're both going to be talking about Vengeance, like I did.
All I can say is this is Mick Strawn, production designer. Yeah, go ahead and plug any more web addresses or anything real quick.
Okay, BehindTheScreensBook.com to get my book. I also have a podcast, Dream Warrior Review. You can listen to me when you're not listening to Mike here. Thanks a lot, guys.